Okay, we're live.
Okay, so the questions that we are supposed to discuss is to first briefly share some points of the interview. Don't disclose the names, but talk about who you talked to, their child or children, and what you found out. So for mine, I spoke to my sister. I just called her on the phone. She has twin 2-year-olds. And so that was kind of cool because it was neat to not only could she compare her children to other children, but she could compare them to one another as well. So that was kind of neat. Um, neither one of them have a disability, so I wasn't able to talk about that with her. But it was still kind of neat to just kind of talk about her kids, and they're only 2, so they were like the lowest end of the bracket. But it was neat to talk about their development and all of that stuff. So let's see here. One thing that I found out is that so the oldest of the 2 was a little bit throughout the whole pregnancy, my sister's whole pregnancy. They thought that the kids had twin-to-twin transfusion, which is when one of the twins basically takes all of the nutrients and then the other twin doesn't really get anything. And so one twin will develop a lot bigger than the other twin, and it can be really dangerous for both babies and for the mom. And it turns out that they did have that at the end, but it was never so severe that one twin was always bigger, but it was never so severe that it was like a significant difference. So when the babies were born, one of the younger one was a lot smaller and had to stay in the NICU a lot longer. And then as they grew, she told me how the older twin grew, developed a lot faster physically. He learned to crawl a lot faster. He learned to just move around a lot quicker than the other twin. But when it comes to cognitive development, like speech and all of those things, the smaller twin is actually developing faster than the other one. So it was kind of neat to me to think that, one of them developed faster in the physical aspect, and then one developed faster in the cognitive aspect, and I thought that was kind of interesting. After doing this interview, what is your sense of normal, and what does normal mean? I think after doing the interview, it just kind of goes to show that every child is different, and the reason that the normal range is so wide is because every child is completely different, and just because one child might be a little bit delayed in one aspect of development doesn't mean that they are slow or aren't going to reach that milestone. And so I think my sense of normal now is just has a better understanding of that. Unless they're like so outside the timeline, it really isn't a big deal. You know, your child will get there, the child will develop at their own rate and at their own speed. We have these norms, these normal range for a reason to help us know know a little bit more of where our child's supposed to be when. But I just think that normal is just so hard to define because every child is different, and every child develops slower than others or faster than others, and it doesn't mean that one child is more normal than the other. It just means that they're unique, their own person. Did you find that the parents were often the last to know if there was a delay or problem with their child? How did they come to that awareness, and did you get a sense of whether or not parents were receptive to receiving services? This one was kind of interesting to me. I don't think that parents are the last to know if there's a delay problem. I think parents are usually the first to know because they're the ones that are with the child every single day and see their development from day one. I do think, though, that it depends on the parent. One thing that me and my sister talk about is I actually have a nephew who has cerebral palsy, and his parents were in that situation. I think that they actually were the last one to recognize that their child was a little bit delayed, but it's not because I don't think that they saw the warning signs. I think they were just didn't want to accept that my nephew had a problem. And so the rest of us would all point it out and say, hey, you should probably take Matt to the doctor. I don't think something's not right. He's not crawling, he's not moving his legs like he's supposed to, and just different things like that. And my sister and brother-in-law just had a hard time coming to that realization and actually being like, yeah, you know what, we probably should take him to the doctor because something's not right. Whereas in my sister's instance with her twins, when they were 7 weeks old, she noticed that both of them had like a bulge on their stomach. And she's a very on top of things person. She's very like hypochondriac and freaks out over everything. And so when she saw this bulge, she freaked out and took the twins in, and the doctor said, no, it's fine, because it would come and then it would go, and it would come back and then it would go. And so the doctor said, no, they're fine, like, don't worry about it. But she was very adamant about it and just kept pushing for it, and found out that they both had hernias in their stomach. And so she, in that instance, was definitely the first one to, like, pick up on it and say, no, something's not right, like, you know, you need to do something about it. And so I definitely think it depends on the parents, and I think it depends on the problem. I think that sometimes, even in my brother and sister-in-law's case, I don't think that they didn't recognize it. I think that they were just in denial and were afraid. They were afraid to admit that their child probably had something wrong, because it's scary, and you never want your child to have something wrong. And so I think that they were just a little bit in denial. But I definitely think that parents are receptive to their kids, and they know what they want, they know what they need, they know what's normal, what's not normal for that specific child, and I just think that parents are the first ones to know whether or not there's a delay or a problem with their kid. The last question, is that the last question? Yeah, the last question is, did you get a sense that parents were uncomfortable or had a sense of denial, shame, embarrassment related to their child's special needs? Or did they feel a sense of resolution or acceptance and had a long-term plan for dealing with their child's needs? Again, kind of going back to that same situation, in my sister-in-law's case, she definitely felt some denial, I think. But once it was finally out in the open that, yes, he had cerebral palsy, he was going to have some developmental delays, he needed to start going to therapy, you know, occupational and speech and physical therapy and all these different things. They told him that he might never walk, but luckily he had a really mild form, and so he was able to learn to walk, but it's still a long road. He's 11 now, and he still has difficulty walking. He can't run like the other kids. He's supposed to wear braces on his legs, and I think that they're dealing with the long-term effects as best as they can. I definitely think that they could maybe push a little bit harder for those things. They weren't always the best with putting his braces on because it hurts him. It forces him to walk heel to toe, and it straightens out his feet, because right now his feet are turned in and he walks on his tippy toes. And it hurts his legs, it hurts his feet whenever they put those braces on, because it straightens everything out and it forces his legs to walk in a way and use muscles that he's not used to using. And so it does hurt him, and I think that was part of the reason why my sister-in-law didn't make him wear it all the time, because she felt bad and she didn't want her son to be in pain. But I definitely think that maybe if they had just followed through with that a little bit more, then maybe he'd be better off in the long term of walking and his legs. My sister, who has the twins, I definitely think that she just wanted to know that her kids were going to be okay. And so she pushed for it, and she pushed for it, and she pushed for it until finally they got surgery. Both of them had to get hernia surgery at like 8 or 9 weeks or something like that. And I think she felt a sense of resolution knowing that it was going to be okay. She did her part. She got her kids the medical attention that they needed, and everything was going to be all right from there. And it has been. So I think it's just interesting as parents to know that your child's well-being is kind of in your hands. And it's up to you to know when something's not right or when something needs to be fixed or addressed. And I think it completely depends on the child, on the parent, on the situation, on the circumstance, on how a parent will react to the different things. But I think most times parents want what's best for their child, and even if that means it's a long-term acceptance that they have to go through, they'll do it because they love their child and they want what's best for them. So it was just interesting to me to talk to my sister and see her experiences with her twins, but we were also able to talk about our nephew, who I don't mean to ever downplay his mom. His mom is wonderful. She's so good to him, and he's a happy, happy, happy little boy. And he's developed just fine now. Cerebral palsy is like not even a thing for him. He's just smart and happy and loves his family, and everything's good. So I'm not downplaying my sister-in-laws, thing as a mother. But it was just really interesting to be able to compare the different situations and just see how each parent handled it differently, um, and any different given situations. So that was mine. Anybody else want to go next?
I can go.
Okay. Do you know the questions, or do you need me to
Yeah,
repeat them for you?
I see him. Yeah, I found him.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
okay, so I've told Rachel this before, but my husband and I just moved to Albuquerque, and we still like don't know anyone. So I was like having a hard time finding someone. So instead, I just did my brother-in-law, who isn't in the 2 to 11 age, but I'm just reverting back to when he was in the 2 and 11 range because he has special needs, and so I hope that's okay. I just couldn't. I just had no idea who to do. Um, so my brother-in-law he's actually my age now, but he was born with he had seizures a lot when he was a baby, and so they actually went in and took out half of his brain and then put in silicone, like I think it's silicone, like a silicone base thing, and the other side to kind of keep. I think it's just to keep the shape or whatever. But he is solely on crap. What is it? They took out his right side. So your right side controls your left, and your left side controls your right. If I said that right. So he so like the left side of his body is underdeveloped. So his hand is like he still has everything, but like his foot is more of like a club foot, and he has to wear braces on his hand and his foot, and then his left eyelid he kind of has like a lazy eye, like he can still see out of it, but he needs glasses. He has just yeah. So um, a lot of times when this happens, it's like a pretty you might have seen it in your other like child classes because actually it did have we did like a they did show like a video on like the same thing that happened to my brother-in-law um, and it's interesting to see like how they are like how different how sorry can't talk people that had the same procedure done they are at different developmental stages in their life. My brother-in-law is more I feel like he's more of a severe case. He can still walk and talk and do everything. He doesn't have very good use of his left side, so like a lot of times like cutting up food he can't really do. He showers and does all that kind of stuff by himself. Normally, like my father-in-law will help him with um, uh, brushing his teeth, getting him ready for bed, um, cuts his food for him, just kind of stuff like that. But he's very, very smart. He basically has like the entire scriptures memorized. Um, but he remembers everything. So if you ever say anything to him or ever do anything to him, bad or good, he will remember it for the rest of his life. And so my husband always says he remembers a couple years ago, and I was kind of trying to get like glean from him when my brother-in-law was younger, like in the 10 and 11 age. And my husband Jared was like, "Oh yeah, I remember when I had to watch Zach one time." Or sorry, I know you're not supposed to say names, but I had to watch him one time, and um, my husband ended up getting frustrated with him, and so my brother-in-law still brings it up to this day, like, "Hey, remember that time you got mad at me?" And like, we'll still like, and so my husband like still feels bad because he knows like that he needs lots of extra attention and stuff like that. And so he always, every time he brings it up, he's just like, "Oh, it's like a knife in my heart because I feel so bad that I got frustrated with him because he doesn't know better." And so that's what I kind of talked to. So my sense of normal, I hadn't really been around whole lot of like special needs before. I have twin brothers, and then my husband's a twin, so I kind of have the thing that Rachel has, where you kind of have like the twin thing going on. But I hadn't really been around anybody with special needs until I've kind of met my brother-in-law, and so I was just kind of talking to his mom, and my husband about this, and it was very different um, having a kid with special needs after having, because they have three kids before that, my husband and his twin, and then a daughter, and then their child with special needs. And so she just kind of said, and my father-in-law is very, very, very protective of my brother-in-law. I mean, everything, he like holds his hand as he crosses the street. I mean, it's just, he's very like, nobody gets in between him and my brother-in-law, which is very like adorable to see. But so they kind of just said that they've kind of realized that you can't, like, every child is different, and like raising twins, it was a lot different because those were their first kids, and that was a lot different for them, and then having a girl and then having a child with special needs. And with my brother-in-law, they just said that they had to realize that like they just had to change everything. And my husband even said like when it came to like, he's like, I remember when we were all younger, and if we were playing games or something, like it was always like, even if my brother-in-law took a long time to like guess or did stuff like that, it would like they still like waited, like they just, everything, like the whole family dynamic changed. And it was just less attention on everybody. Like like my mother-in-law said, like she still gave everybody equal attention, but my brother-in-law had to get kind of took more attention. She tried to give all, like everybody equal, but just when you have a child with special needs, it's a little bit more difficult to um, kind of, just because he needed so much all the time. But she did say that he's gotten worse as he's gotten older, because now he's very particular about things. Like he has to have a shower at 5 o'clock at night. He has to have dinner at a certain time. For a while, every time we would eat dinner, he had to listen to Mexican music. Just like, which was really fun. But it was just little things like that. He just has little particular things that, he has to go to bed at a certain time. He wakes up at like 4:30 every morning. Just and that and My husband said that was more of like, that was less of a thing when he was younger. He was more easygoing, joked more. Now he's more of like he's more of a serious kid. So um, so I guess what I'm saying with the normal thing, it's more of like normal for my brother-in-law, even though it's different than a normal for the other kids. It's like still like normal. Like he's still very like, he can do everything pretty much that everybody else can do. It just takes him a little bit longer, or he just might need some help. But I mean, especially with like his disability, it's amazing to see how well he's doing. Because a lot of kids, some kids that have had that done, actually end up in a wheelchair and can't walk or can hardly talk and stuff like that. So he's actually very well in like developmental range. He's like doing very well. Um, so the third question to the parents: did you find the parents were often the last to know if there was a delay or problem with their child? How do they come to the awareness? And did you get a sense of whether or not parents were receptive to receiving services? So it's like I said, they kind of knew because as an infant, my brother-in-law was having seizures, and which was very, very scary for my mother-in-law, and she didn't know what to do, and she just said she remembers like praying all the time, like just like what do I do? And back then when that procedure was being done, it was very, very new, and not a lot of people had done it. It was like very like innovative, and people were very nervous to do it. And so they did it just because it was either that, or I think he wouldn't have lived that long. And so they were very aware of his disability and have always been, and have, luckily they live in Arizona, and Arizona is actually the #1 state for disabled children. You get the most benefits and the most help from the government, and so that it's like a really good place to live. So for them, and so my brother-in-law was able to always have like classes to go to, and like kind of like not like daycare, but something of that sort. I can't remember what she said it was called. Um, so we always had that. And then, did you get the sense that the parents were uncomfortable or had a sense of denial, shame, embarrassment related to the child's special needs, or did they feel a sense of resolution or acceptance and had a long-term plan for dealing with their child's needs? They definitely have never been embarrassed or like felt shame or anything like that about my brother-in-law. Everybody in the family is very like, he's kind of like the, I don't know how to say it. Like everybody just loves him. Like he's just very funny and very sweet, and you just can't help but love him. And they've never felt that. I mean, even though it's been very hard to raise a child with special needs, especially just because with him he requires a lot of help and requires lots of doctor's appointments and neurology appointments and stuff like that. It's been tough, but it definitely has never been like, they've never felt like they wouldn't wish it away. And my husband was saying when he had a little story to say about it. I guess my brother-in-law had been walking home from school one day, or my husband was walking home from school, and his brother was outside, and my husband was with his twin brother, and these kids were making fun of my brother-in-law, and he was like a little kid at the time, like he was like 10, 8 or 10 or something like that. And my husband told me he like walked up the kids, and he and his twin brother like beat those kids up because they were making fun of their little brother. And it was really cute, but they've always just been, everybody in the family has always been very protective of him. And if you know, if anybody says anything, it's like game over for them. You kind of just don't say anything. And my father-in-law is very protective. My mother-in-law is very protective. But it was interesting to see too. Sorry, I'm talking a long time, I feel like. But my mother-in-law is more prone to let my brother-in-law like be more independent. Like she encourages him to um like do things on his own because she feels like I can, he can do more than we think sometimes. And but my father-in-law is more prone to be the protective, like, oh no, I'll do it for him. Like he doesn't need to do it, he can't do that. I'll do it and stuff like that. So it was interesting to kind of see that dynamic too, because it's, I think it is always that case. Like you always have one parent that's more protective and then one that's more lax. And it was interesting to see that my mother-in-law was more of the lax one, and my father-in-law was more of the like very protective of him and doesn't, like won't let him, he's like, no, I have to do that. I have to. So it was kind of interesting. But yeah, that was my thing.
Perfect. Thanks. That was really good. It does remind me of, I think it was like, it's one of the classes I'm in this semester, but it was just like a couple weeks ago. We had to watch a video about a boy who had that same exact procedure done. And he like lost all function of his left arm, but he's like done amazing. And he like can speak and he can basically take care of himself. He just doesn't have function of his left arm. So it was basically trying to like demonstrate like the plasticity of the brain and how this kid can have half of his brain taken out, but he can still, like, his brain molds and adapts and just allows him to have the same function. So thanks, that's really cool that you have a brother-in-law.
I was talking about things too, so.
Yeah, I remember that one. So who wants to go next, Julia or L'Oreal?
I'll go, if you don't mind.
Okay, perfect, great.
Hopefully he'll stay quiet. I interviewed my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law. They have 2 kids, both girls. One is 5 and one just turned 2, but I mainly interviewed about the 2-year-old because she does have special needs. She has something that's called Charge syndrome, which it's basically like there's this giant spectrum, like list of things that can go wrong, and if they have 7 of them, then they're classified as having CHD syndrome. And so, let's see, to name like some of the things that she has, one of her ventricles on her heart didn't form correctly or something, so she had to have open heart surgery within the first week of being born. She has no auditory nerves in one side of her ear, and the other side has some, but they were able to put in one of the implants, and so that she can hear a little bit. She has no gag reflex or anything like that, so she has to be fed through a stomach port for now. She was born with a cleft lip and a cleft palate. One eye socket is too small, so one eye kind of protrudes out. She has paralysis on the left side, right side, one of her sides, so she can't blink. So they had to go in and put some like weight, like I think they put like gold or something in her eyelid to make it heavier so it can help her blink. She has no like taste buds really, like she can tell if it's, you know, like the basic senses, like if it's sweet, sour, or bitter. Other than that, she won't be able to tell if it's, you know, she can't tell what chicken is unless it's hits one of those senses. For the most part, I think those are like the major issues. So she's obviously very underdeveloped for a 2-year-old. Physically anyways. Mentally, as far as we can tell, she's very smart. She can spell a few words. They have a little light up thing that she spells, and but as far as physically, she is just now being able to crawl. She can walk with this little like an old person kind of walker, but for babies. She can kind of use that, but eventually she's going to have to get braces on her feet to where she can walk properly, kind of like your nephew. But she's not big enough to have those yet, I don't think. So yeah, she's little. I guess that's part of the CHD syndrome too. She's small. She is probably, see, my son's almost 5 months, and she only weighs maybe 4 or 5 pounds more than him, and she's not much taller, so she's really little. She's super cute though. Let's see, what else? But they did find out most of this stuff while my sister-in-law was still pregnant. They knew there was going to be major heart issues when she was pregnant. They thought there was a possibility that she would have Down syndrome, but she doesn't have that. So they had a good sense of what was coming. They didn't know to the extreme what was coming, but they knew it was going to be rough. The older sister, she's done really well with it actually, because the 2-year-old, you know, obviously requires so much attention, but she, you know, is just right there alongside with mom and dad, helping and loving, and you know, she does everything she can to help out. And her parents are also very good at making sure that the older daughter also gets a lot of, you know, one-on-one time. You know, they'll, you know, take turns and taking her out, or sometimes my my mother-in-law will babysit, and you know, so they can just take out the older daughter and have a lot of one-on-one time. And my sense of normal, you know, it didn't really change much, because I've worked with special needs for a little over a year and a half at the high school level, and so working with them, there really is no real normal. It's different for every kid, for every disability, or even, you know, children without disabilities. There's really no normal. There's guidelines, and you know, like you said, if you're so far out of the spectrum, then okay, there's something, you know, that needs to be done or looked at, but until you hit that point, there's not really anything to do, I guess. Like, I don't know, for my son, he's 5 months and he's lazy and still not rolling over, and most kids are, my sister has one that's a month older than he is, and he was rolling over at like before he turned 4 months. And so now my son's 5 months, and I'm like, what the heck? You lazy. But it's not a big deal because he's not far out of the guidelines. There's still, he has plenty of time to roll over. So there really is no sense of normal. There's just kind of guidelines. But even that, if you have a child with special needs, those guidelines go completely out the window. Because like I said, my 2-year-old niece can't even really walk yet. Did you find that the parents were often last to know? Yes and no on some of the things. Obviously, they knew from the beginning when she was still pregnant that there was going to be issues, but there was no way for them to know how severe the issues were until the doctors were able to actually go in and look over the child and let them know. But now that she's older, as far as, for the most part, I still think they're the first to know because they are with her all the time. They, as a parent, you know your child, when something's not right. So for the most part, they're still, obviously the first to know, but there's things like, they're trying to get her to learn how to swallow again so she can start eating real food, and they have to go do tests for that. So there's no real way for them to know, if her gag reflex is getting better or not, until they go to the doctors, and the doctors can tell them that, because they can't just test that on their own. So for the most part, I'd say, yeah, they do know, you have gut feelings as a parent whether or not there's something wrong with your child. It's just a matter of what really is, I guess, is what it comes down to. They obviously are very receptive to receiving services. She has had to have all kinds of different appointments, and she has all kinds of different therapy. She has to go to a speech therapist even if she can't talk, because the speech therapist is teaching her or trying to help her, use her tongue, and so she can learn to swallow. And then she has a physical therapy and all different kinds of therapies. So they do reach out quite a bit, and they use as much services as they can because they want to have their daughter, have the best life as she can, and they feel like, to get help and is the best way to do that by getting help. Do you get the sense that parents were uncomfortable? They definitely were never had any kind of denial or shame or embarrassment or anything like that. They accepted it from the beginning. They knew it wasn't going to be easy. They knew, they knew it was going to be really hard. But they just kind of accepted it. They knew the Lord had a plan, and whatever was happening is going to happen, and they just kind of go with the flow. They have, as much of a long-term plan as they can. They work with their therapist and set goals, and to try to keep her on track and whatnot. So they do have a long-term goal, but with special needs, you can only have so long of a goal. You can't have crazy like lifelong goals, because it just changes day to day. Every day is different when it comes to special needs. They're really pushing her. In the beginning, they were so worried about her physical developments that they kind of forgot about her cognitive. So it was such a surprise when they found out she could spell, because it was total, like, she totally did it on her own. They didn't help her or anything. It was just with this game. And so, they had one of the therapists, they showed her what all was going on, and they were like, well, yeah, you have to talk to her, like, you have to interact with her. They were just so focused on trying to get her physically where she should be, that they kind of forgot about the cognitive part of her brain. And and being since that she's deaf, if she doesn't have her hearing aid on, then she can't hear. So, they're not always used to, just talking and, treating her like a normal baby all the time. They're, used to, treating her like a special needs baby, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, they just kind of forgot, but now obviously they're better at it. So it's kind of cool. They've done really well. And for me, in my eyes, with this whole situation, because it's not easy. Like they can't feed her. Well, they can feed her out in public, but they have to bring this whole system, where it has to like hang in like an IV bag and then drip and then go into her stomach, and so it's just a whole big effort. And so they've done really well with it, I think. It's kind of amazing and inspiring to watch them, parent both of these little girls. But yeah, that was my experience.
Thanks, Julia. That sounds like it'd be really, really hard. I think you need it takes a very special set of parents, I think, to be able to deal with special needs, and it can be really hard. But thank you for sharing that. All right, L'Oreal, do you want to give your experience?
Sure. And mine's going to go kind of fast because the parent that I talked to, he has kids, but they're older and they develop normally. So they didn't have any special needs. But he works at a place that has it's like Child Protective Services in Arizona. They help families reunite after having difficulties, and a lot of times those cases are referred to the company that he works for, and a lot of them deal with special needs like schizophrenia and any kind of special needs, learning disabled, developmentally disabled. And so he comes across people who are coming in and out of the facility, and they'll walk around the halls. They have things for people to do, computers they can work at and stuff. But anyway, so he has people coming in and out of his office to say hi, and some of them are kids. And there was this one kid, trying to remember, I think he said she was like 9. And he didn't really know what was wrong with her, but she just was kind of different. She couldn't talk as well and as she would at that age. So one thing that he loved about her is that she was always just so happy, and he always felt so comfortable and happy to see her. And so yeah, like I said, I don't have a whole lot to say, but he was never, it talks about, did you get a sense that the parents were uncomfortable? And since he's not necessarily her parent, he was never uncomfortable around her, even though she had special needs, because of just the happiness factor that she had. She was just a joy to be around, and she'd give people hugs, and and so after doing this interview, what was your sense of normal? I think of normal as in terms of like a child that, the typical child hits their milestones. You go to the doctor and the doctor says, is she talking? Is she walking? Is she doing this or that? And you typically say yes about certain things. And then I think there is a normal for like a Down syndrome child, or a normal for an autistic child, a high-functioning autistic child. So they have that kind of range that normal means, if that makes sense. So, which I think is good. I think it can be hurtful sometimes for parents to, it can be used in hurtful ways, like, oh, your child's not normal. That would be hurtful to hear if I had a child that was that had developmental problems. But I think it's a good tool for doctors to use in terms of trying to see if there's a problem. And then, yeah, the next question doesn't really apply because the person I talked to wasn't a parent of a child that had developmental issues. Um, but yeah, it says, did you get a sense of whether or not the parents were receptive to receiving services? Obviously, the girl that would visit the guy that I talked to, um, her parents were very involved in receiving services to um, help them overcome the challenges they were dealing with. And I think that's about all the questions that apply to my situation. So that's it.
Okay, great. I think I really like how you said that, and Julia, you kind of mentioned it as well, that like normal changes for every like type of child, like it's a normal, like the normal range for a child with cerebral palsy is going to be different than a normal range for a child with Down syndrome or autism or just a normal developing child. It's just, I like how you make it very clear that like, it's different for every child, and it should be that way because like you said, it can be hurtful, like I don't have kids, but I think that obviously when I do have kids, I'm going to love them and I'm going to want the best for them. And I think it could be really hurtful if I took my child to the doctor and the doctor said, your kid's not normal, there's something wrong. But if we know beforehand that my child does have something that could be wrong with them or her, and then I know that the set guidelines for that specific disability has changed from a normal child, then I think it can be taken a little bit differently, because then I know that I'm not looking for the same things that another person might be looking for in their child. I'm looking for certain milestones within my child's limitations and, things that they can actually do. So I really like that you said that. Does anybody else have anything to add? No? Okay. So the last thing it wants us to talk about, so the last question is, what can you learn from this experience about normative variation, maturational delay, transient disorders, or persistent impairments? Did you see any themes or patterns occurring in your discussion and findings about your respective interviews? So, like, what are some things that maybe you felt all of us kind of experienced within our own parent interview, even though we all interviewed very different parents with very different children? So what are some things that you think like apply to all of us?
I was just thinking about something, and this doesn't really apply to my interview. But just the power of resilience in people. My dad, he graduated from high school, and he basically couldn't read because they didn't know a lot about dyslexia then. So his teachers would say, pick a vocation, maybe fix cars, but don't plan on going to college because you can't make it. You don't have the skills to be, reading really helps. Helps you educate yourself. And he just couldn't read very well at all by the time he graduated. But he went on to get his master's in sociology, and then he got his PhD in education. And I just think about how we have to be careful about not limiting ourselves or our children or anyone else's children, and at the same time not pushing too hard, but just trying to understand how to best help them. And I think it's got to be hard. I mean, I'm sure the teachers that were telling my dad were really trying to be realistic. They even called his parents in and said, he's not going to make it in college. Don't even send him, and they were trying to be helpful and realistic. But I think people need to have hope, and they need to have some vision, and I just think the human spirit is just amazing in dealing with some of these issues.
Yeah.
I like, sorry, I want to say something real quick. I think that's like, I think that's kind of like the main theme that we kind of like all took away from this is that, um, like even though a child can have special needs, or even though, um, and like Julia said, like they treat, um, your niece like she's a special needs kid, and sometimes forget to treat her like she's a baby. Um, and I think that's like kind of like what we can take away from that is just that, even though people have different things and everybody has something, like just because, the people we talk about, in this discussion, like even though they may have like special needs, like it doesn't mean I don't have something, and like that my husband doesn't have something and all my siblings didn't have something. Like we all have something that like, parents have to be sensitive to. Um, and so I think it's just like, and it's just like L'Oreal said, like, um, kids are resilient and they really can, like, I mean, my brother-in-law, he's doing amazing, and he just, he had half his brain taken out, which is crazy, and like he's still able to walk and talk and do all this stuff. Um, but like I think sometimes we feel like if we see any like variation from normal, we're kind of like, oh wait, you have to, like the flags start going up, like okay, like you have to be sensitive about this, and I think you do to a certain point, but it's just like L'Oreal said, like you have to let like, let kids be kids, let them be themselves, and like let them grow to the way that they're gonna grow and develop and stuff like that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think too that like the thing I took away from the whole like parent interview in general, is that I think that, I don't know, I don't have kids, and so I would be lying if I said that one of my biggest fears is having a child with special needs, just because it's hard. And it's not just hard for the parents, but it's hard for the child. And I think that that makes it even harder for the parents, because you love your child and it's hard to see somebody that you love so much suffer. And so that is a fear of mine, like you never know what's going to happen. But I think that it just goes to show that parents are resilient, and that parents adapt. And even though it's never an ideal, nobody ever wants that for their child. But I think it just goes to show that parents have a strength that they don't know they have until they are forced to deal with something like a special needs child. And then next thing they know, they're an amazing parent to this child, and they're helping them develop as best as they can, and just doing everything that they can to make this child happy and feel loved and develop as normally as possible. And so I just think that, talking to my sister, thinking about my nephew situation, hearing all of you guys' experiences, it just goes to show that parents we adapt and we handle the task at hand. And if that means that we have to have a son that has to get half of his brain removed, is that fun? Is that scary? Yeah, but we make it work, and we love them, and we do everything that we can to help them. If it's having a 2-year-old daughter that has lots of issues that make it really hard, we adapt and we do what's necessary. And so I just think that, the Lord knows us, and He gives us what we can handle, and even if we think that we can't handle it, we make it work, and we do the best that we can, and we provide for this child. And whether it's a normal child, a special needs child, whatever the case may be, I just think that's the thing I take away from this, is that we can do it, parents can do it, parents do it. Time and time again, there's parents that don't ever have to worry about children with disability, and then there's parents that have one or more children with disabilities, or even illnesses. I mean, terminal illnesses, just those are scary too. And so I just think that that's what I take away the most, is just that parents adapt, we're resilient, we do what we need to do, we love our children, and we take care of them. So that's kind of what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I was thinking, one of the first words that popped in my head when you read the original question was acceptance. In every single one of our interviews, our interviewee, there was a time, point in their lives where they had to accept, that their child wasn't perfect, or there was something wrong with their child, or as becoming a parent, you have to, I guess, learn to just roll with the punches and accept whatever comes your way. not a whole lot you can do to change anything about it. And then in like your nephew's case, eventually it took him a little longer to accept that their son, may have some issues, but eventually they did, and now he's gotten the care that he needed, and so on and so forth. So for some of us in certain situations, it definitely does take longer to accept that our child may have special needs or there may be something wrong. Like for example, there's a parent, or not parent, a student I worked with. He had autism, and he was 18, just turned 18 years old. And his mom, bless her heart, still swears that he's going to wake up one day and, the light's going to come on and he's going to be totally normal. So, he's 18 and she still hasn't completely accepted that her son has autism, that he was low functioning, so he'll never speak, he'll never be able to be that independent kid that that you want. So for some of us it comes with time, other of us it comes easier, but as a parent, no matter what, you're going to accept whatever comes with that kid and you're going to take care of them.
Yeah, definitely. I actually really like that point. I didn't think about that before, but it's true because, I mean, you really only have two choices as a parent. I mean, you find out that your child has a disability, you either have the choice to accept it and deal with it and do what's necessary, or be in denial and try to avoid it and treat them like nothing's wrong, and that's not helping anybody out. And so that's a really good point, because it's you only have two choices, and I think, like you said, some parents, it might take them a little bit longer to get to that point. But when push comes to shove, you got to just accept it and do what you need to do to help that child, even though it's not desirable or what you wanted. You just got to push through and make the best out of the situation that's at hand. So thanks for that. Does anybody else have any comments or anything? No?
No.
Okay. All right, so I think we covered all of the questions that we were supposed to go over. I think we had some pretty good discussion. So I completely forgot that I was supposed to keep track of the time too. So I don't exactly know. When I was done talking, it was 12:06, and now it's 12:47. So I'm assuming we're like.
It'll say on how long the broadcast is.
Oh, how long is this? Okay, perfect.
So I can actually stop it right now if everybody's good.
Okay, yeah, I'm good.
Okay.